Hello, I am Mark Fishkin, the founder and director of the California Film Institute and the Mill Valley Film Festival, and I'm so happy that you could be with us tonight for this very special screening of The Nest. We are so honored that we have with us tonight Sean Durkin, the director of The Nest, and Carrie Coon, the star of the film as well. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, it's our pleasure. This is such a fantastic film, and Sean, you've been able to defy every expectation of a traditional family drama. And in fact, at times I was going, am I going to see a ghost in this film? But the complexity and the nuance at the same time is just extraordinary. And I know you're the writer as well, and of course, every writer brings something personal to this, but I've heard that you have lived in many different places, and I wonder what kind of effect you personally, your past has had on you picking this particular subject matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very personal film. It certainly started as a reflection on childhood. I moved between England and America as a kid, and actually sort of did it the reverse way. I lived in England and moved to New York in the early 90s. And I think when I went back to England to shoot Southcliffe, and I hadn't been there in 20 years. And when I was there, I was really reflecting on that time and how different the two places were in the late 80s and early 90s versus now, where they're a lot more seamless. So really started to explore that time in my life and reflect on my childhood, and I wanted to make something that looked at a family and how a sudden move can really upend a family and bring out some of the things that operate under the surfaces. And yeah, so I really, it's funny. I think I start in writing with going to like very sort of sensory places. Like thinking about my childhood in England, I remember just having cold, wet feet all the time. so there's like a certain discomfort I have associated with it. And going to that will sort of like take me back to remembering specific details and just kind of building those things. And then over the course of making the film, I became a parent myself. And so, my focus shifted, and then I started to think about being a parent, and so it was quite a journey, but a very deep, reflective one.
I was going to ask about the casting, because it's so important here, and certainly I'd like to hear a little bit about how you, Carrie, and Sean got together to do this. But your character, Allison, Carrie, is so complex and authentic. It's fierce. There's aspects of a loving mother. It's sexy. It's funny, outrageous. It almost feels like you wrote this exactly for Carrie. Could you both tell me a little bit about that? Maybe Sean, start about how you cast Carrie.
Yeah, I mean, the role, I just, human beings are more than one thing, and so often in movies someone gets boiled down to being one thing, and so I wanted to have characters that were many things, as we are, and wanted to have a marriage that was all those things. I wanted to see a marriage where people were attracted to each other. I feel like it's such a simple thing and we don't get to see it a lot. And also a marriage where they fight and love, and sort of the fight is to be together, but they're very different but very similar. And so I just wanted all those complications. And yeah, I knew I needed somebody who could capture all these sides of Allison and bring them together in a very powerful way, and that obviously is Carrie. and we had met a couple times in the previous couple of years through friends, and yeah, and so I work really closely with my casting director, Susan Shotmaker, and very early on I showed Susan the script, and we were just running through lists as you do, and then Susan was like, oh, Carrie Coon. And I was like, yes, of course, of course. And so I called Carrie right away and sent her the script, and we started talking.
Mhm.
Well, Carrie, you just did a spectacular performance here. And what did you think when you read the script? And obviously you liked it. We know that.
Right. Well, I don't know if you've noticed, Mark, but I don't get asked to play leading ladies in films very often. So first and foremost, it was very flattering to be thought of at all, because so often these scripts get snatched up by the extraordinary actresses, you know, working at a higher level than me. So it's very rare that they make it to me in the first place. And then when I read it, of course, it's so, I'd seen Martha, Marcy, Me, and Marlene, and I had some friends in the film that worked with Sean and had a very good experience. And the script is so specific. The relationships between each character were so specific. Allison, as you rightly pointed out, was complicated on the page. That wasn't something I made up. And, you know, more importantly, it was a 50-50 lead. She was not some, you know, collateral damage in a man's journey, you know. And also, I had never seen marriage dealt with this way. I had seen movies about divorces, movies about dead children, movies about infidelity, but never movies just explicitly about marriage and about the tacit agreements we make in marriage. And in that regard, the movie felt so truthful and just so grounded in reality. And in, you know, my own parents had an egalitarian marriage in the 80s. So the dynamic was really familiar to me as well. Two working parents, you know, a working woman who's an entrepreneur and maybe chafes a little bit under the conventional expectations of being a housewife. And sort of grounded. I mean, I'm a Midwesterner. I grew up outside. So that part of her was very familiar to me as well. And yeah, just, of course I said yes. And I got to ride horses.
Yes, and what a beautiful horse! Oh my
Yeah.
God! It plays an important role in the film and your relationship with it, of course. And I think you're being a little modest about your film career. You're such, you know, great films that you've worked on, Gone Girl and many others. But you've had a tremendous career in the theater, nominated for Tonys and you know, just amazing, amazing work. And this film, to me, though very filmic by its essence, somehow, maybe it's because of the house or other things, I'm not quite sure, has this this theater sensibility to it. Did it feel
As
more
an
like
actor,
working on a film or
did.
theater? I don't know if that's a silly question.
No, I think that's a great observation, Mark, because so often you might notice the camera is quite far from us. And so for Jude and myself, Jude also comes from the theater, you know, he keeps returning to the theater as well. And so we work similarly. So sometimes it felt like we were just rehearsing a scene in a room by ourselves because the camera was so far. And you know, we got to do it 12 times and it was very much like being in play practice. So, but I think Sean can speak to that, you know, that sensibility a little more specifically, but it felt like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like to set up and be out of the way of the actors. Like I think the best performances come from giving actors trust and space. And, you know, first and foremost, providing them with the specificity so they know, you know, what to hold on to and how to build a character and stuff. But, you know, I think in terms of shooting, I like to do very minimal with setups and very little coverage, like 2-3 shots per scene, and just really try to create. Yeah, in a way, it's turning a room into a stage. I mean, I think it's very accurate assessment. You know, the big fight that Rory and Allison have, that in particular felt, because of the size of the room and the feel, I think that really felt, doing it that day, felt like we were on stage. And the camera, I just like to give the distance and the space so that they can feel the moment. I think that's where the truth is really found in a scene.
Well, it really worked, powerful. And were some of the scenes like Allison dancing, were those in the script? Were those impromptu, or how did?
All of them are in the script. Every moment you see, even moments where sometimes even when Allison is smoking versus when she's not smoking, pauses are in the script. I mean, Sean is very specific, but he's not prescriptive. When you're going to actually make the movie, Sean is very open to collaboration. And if something doesn't feel right, or even he would edit his own work on the fly, if it felt like something suddenly felt too wordy in an actor's mouth, he would say, let's just get rid of that part. So he's not he is specific without being precious, which
Yeah,
is, as an actor, I mean, that's, you know, it's a dream.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Overly prepared, but open to
Exactly.
Yeah,
spontaneity.
but adaptable in such a
Yeah.
marvelous way.
Yeah, I really think about every single detail, but then on the day don't hang on to any of it. Like I really think it's about being prepared so you know it's there and you know what you can do, but anything that doesn't feel right instinctually, I don't feel attached to almost anything once we start on the day. I think it's about like finding that spontaneity on the day.
The cast as a whole has this kind of a special relationship that you can really feel and feels authentic. And what was it like, you know, shooting it? Was there one location for a great length of time, and you know, dealing with these very intimate relationships of mother and husband and father and daughter and son and all these things. What was that like? Was that contributed to it? Did it just make you feel like, oh God, I've had enough. I can't wait till this is over. I'm sure it wasn't that, but could you give me a description of, you know, kind of what that was like and how it added to, you know, the actual production?
It was a very, very relaxed, peaceful, fun set. I mean, it was very calm, lots of laughter, lots of love, a really wonderful team. And, you know, with the chemistry with the actors, both within the family and also then, you know, the individual relationships that Jude's character has, you know, at work, those, you know, I think it just comes down to casting and being on the same page, you know, picking someone for a role who's right for whatever qualities they have, and then letting them bring those qualities. And there was just a lot of humor, you know, like there's a lot of heart and humor. It was really important to me that the friendships and the family all was loving, even though, because there's a lot of decisions that could be judged for not being loving or not being well-meaning. And I just wanted to make sure that all of the decisions really, while misguided, were well-meaning from the point of view of the character making them.
Yeah, that authenticity really shows up. And what we might as well, certainly now appropriate to talk about the cast. Benjamin and Sam characters they're such fine young actors. What was not only how did you find them? I mean, was it an obvious choice? Like, you know, oh, of course, Carrie.
Yeah,
What was that casting like?
so with they were very different, you know. Charlie Shotwell plays Ben, has so much experience,
Yeah,
you know,
more
like,
than me.
yeah, he might have like more movie credits than Carrie. I mean, he's been in stuff for years, and he's just such a wise kid. So like, you know, I think he was 11 when we shot. I'm like, I've never met a 7-year-old like this. Like,
Nope.
kid's a genius, and just so wonderful. And so yeah, we did. So Susan Shotmaker, you know, we did open casting for kids, and just saw people in New York and LA, and did sort of a nationwide, you know, tapings and things. And so he just was amazing. And I got to meet him. Lives in LA, and I got to meet him, and he was just this wise kid. And I just felt like he, you know, he's very quiet in the movie, which is not how he is as a person. So I thought like that sort of, you know, wisdom that he had, just being, you know, underneath the surface, and him being quite quiet and shy, would be very powerful. And then Una's someone that Susan had known. I think Susan's very in touch with young actors and kids in acting school, and she really takes care of young actors. And I worked for Susan for years, and so I got to develop a lot of relationships with actors, and sort of see great actors before, you know, they get that first role. And so I'm really trusting of that process, and I really wanted someone for Sam, who we hadn't seen before. And so we, again, did a pretty wide casting search. And Susan, I remember I was actually, the day I was going to, Jude, Carrie, and I got one day together in New York, and I had woke up that morning on the way to see them, and Susan had sent me a self-tape that Una had done, and I watched like the first 30 seconds of it. It's like, yeah, this is her. And there's something, it was just the thing I was looking for was the humor that she has and the strength that she has. And you just feel like she's lived through something at 17. And so she just really embodied that. So yeah, it's just one of those things where I kind of, with casting, I just kind of know it when I see it. I don't always know, but once the idea is there, I'm like, okay, and then fully committed to that. And then about trusting that person to do what they do and the reason you hire them.
And Una grabbed Charlie like a brother. And the first day, I remember Jude said to the kids, this isn't a two-hander, this is a four-hander. And you are actors in this movie, and you get to make choices. Now, maybe Charlie Shotwell doesn't need to be told that, but I think the invitation from, Jude to say, we're making this together, and you should make choices. And so everybody, I think, felt really, really open to making some, I think, great and hilarious choices, actually, some of which didn't make it into the film. Like, remember Charlie taking a bite of pizza in this really specific moment? And anyway, they're just delightful. I just talked to Una the other day. She's a dear friend.
And this was Una's first feature, right? Or first.
Mm-hmm. Won't be her last.
Yeah, that's for sure. We talked a little bit about, the complexity of this character, and as Sean said, people are not just one thing, and obviously makes sense. But there are just so many wonderful moments that happen that in some cases, like, the dinner with the Norwegian fishermen farmers, fish farmers, and the humor and the sharpness of that all coming out at the same time. And of course, we haven't really talked about, other than when we talk about theaters, both of your backgrounds in terms of theater and what that was like. But I just have to, I don't know if there's a question there, but I just have to say that those scenes were just so complicated in retrospect, but they made me feel like, one, I know so much about this person, and I'm blown away about the authenticity and how complex it is, but I want to know more about the backstory of her at the same time, other than, she was living in a single room with her daughter when she met her husband-to-be.
Yeah, it's a real testament. Again, I keep coming back to the writing. For me, when I make a decision about the kind of work I want to do, the writing is always first, because we have an expression in the theater: if it's not on the page, it's not on the stage. And I have absolutely found that to be true. You're not going to fix something in the performance of it. And so all of those dynamics are in the piece. And yes, they're specifically written, but Sean also gives actors room inside of those, written dynamics to make choices, and then gives us the trust and the space to make interesting choices. And, my family, I know we have a dark sense of humor, and whenever I see pieces that are humorless, or I read a piece that doesn't have a sense of humor inherent, it doesn't feel authentic to me. Because in my experience, how human beings deal with the darkness in the world is with gallows humor. And so I was really grateful that I didn't have to go searching for that myself. It was absolutely written into the piece, and it's part of who Sean is as well. But yeah, and they're just delicious to play. They're as much fun to play as you might think. And so I think you get to see in the film actors really relishing, those moments, because frankly, as a woman of my age, we don't get asked to use our full selves in this way. So it's wonderful to be asked.
Yeah, it was so, interesting to watch it, because, you have this feeling of dread of something terrible is going to happen. And then afterwards you start thinking about it, well, nothing has happened. I feel really good about them, and they're going to survive, and I care about them. But then you start looking about, people's, just what it takes to live and be a family and to love each other in these complex worlds. And of course, now we're going through a pandemic. Back then it was what we call, the Big Bang and the predecessor to financial collapse. that these things in retrospect have a huge effect on everyone. And in fact, I don't know if I can find it. I feel like like you're talking about, Sean, overly prepared, and then you just don't even pay attention to it. I have 20 different notes here and cards, and I can't see them, and I can't even find the ones I want. But there was one from the composer. I did find this one, Richard Reed Parry. And it wasn't about the Ness particularly, but when I read it, I got this feeling that it's about a different song that's not in the soundtrack, I believe. And it was about a song called Long Way Back. It says, a song about remembering everything you ever lived with in the infinitely complex tapestry of emotions towards your parents. Holding all these things up to the light of memory, embracing it all, and then letting it go.
Yeah.
I think I understand why you work with him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful thing to reference in terms of this movie, absolutely. And yeah,
I can't imagine it without his soundtrack. It really changed the film for me when I saw it in place.
Yeah, we were talking yesterday actually about how he, because his bass became such a central part of the film, and I did a podcast yesterday with him and Jude, and it was he was saying how he found the sort of central theme of the film through trying to tap into sort of like the vibration and the core of the tumultuous nature at the core of Rory. And so there's this other interpretation on the music side that comes from, Jude's interpretation of the character, and it's just this beautiful thing that all follows the script, and that the notion of reflecting and accepting and not making judgment, like that quote you just said of holding things up to the light and accepting and letting go. And I think it's really what the movie's about. Like I think everything in the movie, every character decision is made with love, even though misguided, and that was really important for me. It always is. Like, and I've dealt with cult leaders and spree killers in my work too, and then but as the filmmaker, never judging an action, no matter what. It's not, as a filmmaker, it's not your job to judge the action. It's your job to present it truthfully, and that might be upsetting, it might be violent, it might be funny, it might be emotional, it might be whatever, but it's not your job to judge it. And I feel very strongly about that. And so that's certainly what I've tried to do here, is create a family with no judgment.
Yeah, and that comes through very evidently. And I remember Albert Maysles, I had the honor to meet him very late in his life, maybe mine too. And he said, you have to love your characters no matter how despicable they are. And I'm thinking about, really, documentary, and there's real serial killers there too. And, but it's true, that non-judgmental aspect, that's really important. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of the supporting cast. Mom, Rory's mom, or mom.
Great Anne Reed.
Any English accent, even the most basic one. And it's interesting, that very brief scene, how the dialogue is so great. You don't need to invite me on your mom, but also what you find out about Rory. But at the same time, what we talked about before, about how you almost automatically are filling in the blanks about these characters as the movie's going on. And I have the feeling that, like Carrie as Allison, you already knew that, about your husband. But she was terrific. I don't think I've seen her that much.
Anne Reed is she's very famous in England, and she's an incredible actor, and she's very funny. So seeing her do this is quite amazing. And yeah, I really wanted to have both Rory and Allison each have a scene with the parent, and I wanted to have that symmetry, and I wanted to, to further seeing them as complete people. They're not just parents, they're not just husband and wife, but they're children.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's true.
they're still children in a lot of ways, and to see each of them just sort of transform in that setting was very fun, and there were two of the best scenes to shoot. And with Rory in particular, I think seeing where he came from, seeing this estate, just knowing that this is where he comes from, and that he's someone who is fighting so hard to say, I'm not this place I came from, stops him from being able to fully be himself. And I wanted to show that with his mother, and show how he sort of crumbles a bit. And I also didn't want to allude to some single tragedy either, the thing that made him. I think that's like a thing that happens in movies, is it's like, oh, well, what's that one thing? And it's never one thing, and it's never necessarily, even if there is a single tragedy, it's never necessarily that. It's oftentimes the reactions to it, or the lack of support around it, or it's just never that simple. So I felt really strongly about maintaining that all you know about his father is this one response that he has, this bless him, this single line. And so yeah, that was just such rich territory, and to have Anne was really extraordinary.
No, it is rich, is a apt way to describe it. And rich, it's deep, it's convoluted, it's complex. It's all those things at once, like real life.
Yeah.
So I just can't thank you enough for making this movie, both of you, Sean, Carrie. This is something that I personally waited for a long time. I'm so sorry. There's been plenty good movies about families crumbling at weddings and Thanksgiving and holidays, and one specific tragedy. But this, again, I'm being redundant, just felt so real to me and so engaging. And I can't wait that other people are going to have a chance to see it really wide. So thank you so much for allowing us to see it and taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having us.
Great.
Okay.